Hello, dearest viewers. Today's story is a bit on the heavy side, so be warned. Make sure you're comfortable and let's dive right in. Jake has suffered his entire life with migraine headaches, and sometimes they became debilitating. His last attack was over a year ago, and he was thankful for each migraine-free day. If you've never had a severe migraine, then it might be difficult to relate, but I can assure you the amount of time you suffer and the pain level can bring on a desire for death. You just want the world to end and let you pass on in peace. That level of migraine was rare for Jake, but he knew when they started he needed to pay attention to his body and rest, as he has learned to over his 35 years. Even though he was a large muscular man, something as simple as a migraine headache can render him useless. It was a Wednesday morning when he recognized the signs starting to appear. The double vision, dizziness, and gentle throbbing. He knew he couldn't chance driving in case this came on fast, and ordered a taxi to take him home. He told Jerry, his secretary, to cancel his meetings today, and he would update her later about coming into the office tomorrow. These headaches can last a week, and he wasn't sure how bad this one would be, and wasn't taking any chances. He got home and took 2 Depakote tablets, grabbed an ice pack, and made a beeline to the sitting room, which sat next to their large master bedroom. He had a chair set up in the corner that he used for these rare occasions. Jake would put an ice pack on his head along with an eye covering to keep out the light and just try to meditate, no thinking aloud. Today he did just that. He felt it coming on strong and got on the chair, put the ice pack on his head, covered his eyes, and tried to relax. With the lights in the sitting room off and the curtains closed, he sat there for about 2 hours, and it seemed as if this migraine would not be the brutal ones he was so afraid of having. With any luck, he might be able to function in a couple of hours. He heard some noises from downstairs, and assumed it was his wife of 10 years, and decided to just remain seated as he was not ready for conversation. Linda was familiar with his condition and learned to leave him be until he is over his attack, and always tried to be quiet and leave him rest when she knew he was home. Apparently, Linda was not aware Jake was home, as his car was not in the driveway, and of course, there would be no reason for him to be home, and would need worry, because she knew he comes home at 6 p.m. every night, like clockwork. Jake was able to block out the noise and just float in his meditation and control the attack, which was working. But suddenly he realized that Linda wasn't alone. He heard another voice, and it was a man's voice. He opened his eyes and realized his wife was coming upstairs to their bedroom, and somebody was with her. He remained still and silent and listened closely to their conversation. She was on her cell phone, and they were both giggling. He found it strange and thought he might be dreaming until he heard her talking to Shelly, his brother's wife. He instantly came back to reality when he heard her speaking. "Oh Shelly, I'm with him now. Thanks for setting up this date, and I hope you're right about the size of his clock. I just hope my kitty isn't as sore as yours was last week. He said he will call you tomorrow to set up another date. I'll give you a full report later on. I have to go. Thanks again." The pain in Jake's heart was now suddenly worse than the migraine. He didn't know what he was going to do and realized they had no idea he was there. Why would they? The sitting room was off to the side of the bedroom, and the chair he was in was out of sight. He had a front row seat to the action, completely hidden from the performers. As he sat there, his blood boiled, which didn't help his headache. He felt nausea from the migraine and the event in progress. His heart was breaking, and tears started welling up in his eyes as he realized the woman he loved and cherished just ended their marriage. Completely silent, he sat and listened as he heard pants dropping on the floor and this guy announcing how beautiful his sexy wife's melons were. Jake was falling down a black hole with no way out. He heard them get on the bed and then listened to his wife tell this guy Blake how big his clock was and how she wasn't used to handling something so big, and wondered if his clock will fit inside her kitty. His anger was rising as she asked him to put that big clock in her mouth, and seconds later he heard his future ex-wife slurping and sucking with a gusto he hadn't seen in years. In fact, she hadn't taken his clock in her mouth in years, and complained that she didn't enjoy doing that with him. Restraining himself with all of his willpower, he waited and waited for the right moment to introduce himself into their world, and he didn't have to wait long. After about 5 minutes of Linda sucking this guy's clock, she told her lover to come and put that big clock inside her. Giving him a few minutes to get inside his wife and both of them enjoying each other, he knew it was time to say hello. Controlling his pain and anger, he stood and gained the strength to face the two lovers in their marital bed. He walked very slowly and quietly to see Linda's legs pinned behind her ears and her lover's clock deep inside her kitty. He really didn't need to be quiet because the lovers were making quite a racket enjoying each other's bodies. Linda was looking up into Blake's eyes, begging him to duck her harder when she noticed Jake in the corner of her eye, standing right next to her as she betrayed him in their bed. "Duck. Honey, what are you doing here? "I can explain," she yelled out, trying to get Blake off her. Blake would have none of her protests, and with all of his weight on top of Linda, he continued to duck her as she looked pleadingly into Jake's eyes, yelling at Blake to get off her. That was too little, too late. The pain from his head and heart was too great. Jake walked over to his night table and took out his loaded G45 and placed a slug directly into Blake's left temple. He immediately fell on top of Linda, who lay there in shock with Blake's body bleeding on top of her. With tears in his eyes, Jake looked down at Linda and said, "I love you with all my heart, and you've taken everything I loved away from me. My heart is broken," he said as he put the next bullet into her head and watched her life force leave her body. The two lifeless lovers now lay together on the red-stained sheets. Jake picked up her cell phone and called his brother Robbie, and spoke in an eerily calm voice for someone that just committed a double murder. Robbie answered and said, "Hey bro, what's up?" "Robbie, listen closely. I just caught Linda in bed with this guy Blake, who I think was the new tennis instructor. I heard her talking to Shelly before I caught them ducking in my bed. From what I heard, I think Shelly might have been involved with him as well. You may want to keep an eye on her." "Robbie, stop talking and listen to me. I just off both of them in our bed. I'm not joking around. I don't want you to suffer what I just went through. Find out if she's cheating on you too. Between these migraines and this betrayal, I can't take any more, and I want you to know I love you and I'm sorry. Goodbye Robbie," and the phone died. Before he put the next bullet into his own head, Jake called 911 and reported a double murder slide, and made sure they had the correct address. They found Jake in his migraine chair, still holding the gun with most of his head on the adjacent wall. It was a bloody scene when Robbie arrived 20 minutes later. 1 year later, I'm Robbie, and Jake was my big brother, and this happened almost a year ago. That was the worst day of my life and has greatly changed my world. Losing my big brother because of his cheating wife was difficult for everyone, especially me. He was my best friend and I loved him dearly. When everyone found out that Linda was having an affair in their own home and was the cause of the murder slide, she became a hated figure in this close-knit community. I was still in a dark place and working on my anger and depression from my brother's passing. I never told Shelly what Jake said and decided to keep a very close eye on my wife. I became paranoid after I heard what Jake said just before his slide, and hired a high-end security company to set up all types of monitoring devices and software. It took 2 weeks to get everything in place, and the monitoring began. If Shelly was involved with Linda's infidelity, I wanted to find out the depths of her disloyalty and act accordingly. My pain never weakened, and I became obsessed with learning how my wife was involved in this affair. Sex between Shelly and I became rare and cold after Jake's slide, and the revelation that Shelly was involved in Linda's infidelity. When I received confirmation that Shelly was cheating on me, I remained angry and unforgiving, and only wanted revenge on Shelly, who was betraying me, and for her involvement with Jake's murder slide. Over the year, the security firm had provided me with hours of damning video and audio of Shelly and her lovers. Watching her duck other men was painful, but after my love for her died, what pained me the most was some of the conversations between Shelly and her lovers. Some of those were repeated in my head all the time. "Why do you stay with him? I mean, you said sex with him is boring, and you don't do half the things you do with me. I don't get it. Why not just leave him and move in with me? You said he's not making love to you. Do you think he knows about us?" "No, he's still grieving from his brother's passing. He's been depressed and I don't push him. I don't need him as long as I have you, baby. Look, I love him, and I'll never leave him. I told you since we started this 2 years ago, it's only sex. I don't love you, but I love being with you and I love your clock, just like I love Blake's. You guys were the best thing that ever happened to my sex life. I really miss him, and I can't believe he's gone." "Yeah, I miss him as well. I can't believe your crazy brother-in-law shot him like that. I hope your husband isn't as crazy as he was. I don't want the same thing happening to us. Don't worry, lover, I'd never bring you into our home as she did. We have a good thing going and we'll never get caught. I wouldn't let that happen. It would devastate poor Robbie, and I'd never want to hurt him, which is why I'll never leave him. You'll just have to be satisfied with my kitty in mouth." I could live with that, beautiful. After Robbie discovered her debauchery, he formulated his plan. Shelly ended up ducking the assistant tennis pro, Jared Roberts, who was promoted to head tennis pro after Blake's untimely passing. Robbie got to listen to his wife seduce Jared, and just how manipulative she was. Poor Jared didn't have a chance. After a few weeks, Robbie had the opportunity he needed. Jared was invited to an award banquet for our country club for the best tennis program in the area. He called Shelly and told her about the banquet, and she was excited to stay at the Ritz-Carlton and get away with him for the night. Conveniently, Robbie told Shelly that he had a 2-week road trip coming up, which wasn't uncommon. The dates coincidentally were during the same time as the banquet. Robbie wanted to make sure Shelly had enough rope to hang herself. Sure enough, the next day she called Jared and gave him the good news. She convinced him to make it a longer trip, a 3-night stay at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, and she would rock his world. Of course, getting grade A kitty for 3 full days sounded good to Jared, and he agreed. Over the next week, that's all they talked about on the phone and in their texts. It was Shelly's idea to turn this getaway into a pretend honeymoon, telling Jared she would love to be his new bride and wife for those 3 days. Shelly's idea was all that was needed for them to hatch their plan. She even suggested getting a new wedding ring for the occasion, and to book the honeymoon suite at the hotel to make it more realistic. They would tell everyone that they were newlyweds to get the attention and thrill of being married. She even told Jared that she wished it could be real, and that he really was her husband. Reading all of these texts infuriated Robbie and flamed the embers of his revenge. He was going to enjoy watching her face as she sees everything she loves go up in flames. Shelly spent all of her time getting toned up in the gym. She even had her kitty waxed, a week before Robbie's trip. She planned to surprise her hubby telling him she shaved it for him to spice things up, but of course, she did it for her upcoming honeymoon. Robbie wasn't impressed and wanted nothing to do with his cheating, horse, future ex-wife. She was going to spend 3 days with Jared as his wife on a pretend honeymoon. It would be her first extended time alone with another man since she was married 10 years earlier. She and Jared thought it would be romantic to pretend to be newlyweds on their honeymoon. She purchased several sexy outfits, bikinis, and lingerie for their rendezvous, and was devious in her planning. Robbie was amazed at the level of planning she put in place, and was jealous of the effort she was putting into this guy. The love he once had for her was gone now. Feeling this level of betrayal had removed every last drop of love he had left. It was over in time for Shelly to feel the pain. On the way to the hotel, Robbie called Shelly and only got her voicemail. He left a message telling her he loved her, and things were really hectic at work. He said he loved her and would see her in 10 days. Shelly called him back an hour later, wanting to make sure he didn't get suspicious about anything. She had to finish sucking Jared's cock for the 3rd time that day before she called Robbie. She told him she loved him and that the kids were at their friend's house. The other lie was she told Robbie that she was ordering pizza when the kids came home, and that they would be watching movies all night, and how much she missed him. She said goodbye and told him she loved him more than anything else in the world, and that she couldn't wait until he came back home. Robbie wanted to throw up and just couldn't believe how she lied so easily to him. He arrived at the hotel and gave his card to the valet. Robbie checked with the front desk clerk to see if Mr. and Mrs. Blake Roberts had checked in earlier. His anger grew when the desk clerk confirmed that the newlyweds Mr. and Mrs. Blake had checked into their honeymoon suite yesterday. He checked with the 6 restaurants at the hotel to find out if they had reservations for that evening. Sure enough, the main restaurant confirmed their reservations for 6 p.m. that evening for Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. Strategically selecting the best viewing location, Robbie carefully kept his eye on the couple all through dinner without being noticed. When they were both leaving the main dining room, he was already in position outside the entrance. The plan was to appear as if he was mindlessly entering the restaurant at the same time they were leaving. He saw the newlyweds holding hands after they paid the bill and were about to leave. Everything was perfectly timed. He navigated himself into position at the exact second they were leaving. He purposely turned the corner to bump into them at that precise moment. Shelly's date was almost knocked over as Robbie ran into him as everyone turned to look. They both staggered a little and regained their balance. With a smile, Robbie took a step back and spoke to his wife's date. "Oh, I'm so sorry, excuse me," I declared. I then noticed Shelly and stood there for a long moment with her mouth open, acting shocked and surprised. She paused there in her sexy dress, wanting to run and hide. Her worst fear had just arrived. She froze with her eyes open wide and in complete shock. "Caught. Shelly, is it you? What are you doing here?" I said with a practiced expression. Jared had not realized who I was and what was going on for several minutes. Robbie then took an obvious step back and looked at his wife in a way to act shocked at her outfit. He couldn't believe how she looked. She was wearing an extremely short dress, with a low-cut top and no bra, nylons, CFM pumps, along with glamour makeup and hair. God, I wish she dressed like that for me, he thought to himself. Wow, that is some outfit, Shelly. I've never seen you look so sexy. And who is this? I'm really confused, Shelly. Shelly knew she was caught and tried to think of something to say, but just stood there with her mouth open. She tried to gain some composure and said, "Robbie, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Jacksonville." "Well, change of plans, you know how my job works after all these years. But what the duck is going on here? You're dressed like a slut in a sexy dress with some guy. Let's walk out to lobby and talk," I nearly shouted while grabbing her arm. Once in the lobby, Robbie started talking again. When we spoke earlier you said you were going to stay home with the children. What are you doing here and who is your date? Robbie, it's not what you think. It's not what I think. It's not what I think. I said twice in an amazed voice. I looked down at her hand and then into her eyes. Where are your wedding rings? Holy shit, have you been cheating on me? She looked at her ring finger, and her large diamond ring was gone and replaced by the thin gold band her lover gave her for their pretend honeymoon weekend. She wanted to run and hide, but there was nowhere to go. Robbie, I love you. This means nothing. What means nothing? You're not wearing your wedding ring. Why are you wearing a different gold wedding band? Look how you're dressed. You have never dressed like that for me before. You're out of town with some guy, not wearing your wedding ring, but some new gold band. Are you leaving me for him? Is that what this is about? You say it's not what I think, but it sure looks like something is going on here. I continued to increase the pressure and was enjoying every second of her dismay. I turned to the tennis guy and in a strong voice asked, why don't you tell me what's going on? Shelly looked at Jared in fear, not knowing what he would answer. Dude, relax. It's like your wife said, nothing's going on. There's an awards banquet here at the hotel, and your wife was kind enough to escort me here to support your country club. She was just doing me a favor, everything's cool, man. Now with a wide smile, I tried not to laugh at this jerk. Oh, I see. So, she's being nice and she's just here as your date for the ceremony. Let me ask you a question. Are you sharing a room here at the hotel? And don't lie because I'll want to see both rooms before I leave. They both looked down at the floor, not saying a word. Shelly spoke first. Honey, I love you, please don't be upset. It was just going to be a few days here and nobody was going to know. So, you're here with him for a few days, sharing the same room, having sex, not wearing my wedding rings, and only a new gold band. Oh my god. Are you here pretending to be his wife? Are you on your honeymoon? Already knowing the answer and acting shocked, I did not let up. Honey, it's not what you think, she said, trying to convince me that her infidelity could be explained. With fake rising anger, I spoke loudly, answered the ducking question. I'll go to the front desk and get the answers, so unless you want to be embarrassed, you better start talking. Are you staying in the same room? Answer me. Yes, her tears flowing. Are you having sex? And remember, I'm not an idiot. Yes, Shelly answered, sobbing. Here's the big question. Are you pretending to be his wife? Major sobbing and tears. It's not what you think, baby. Answered the goddamned question. Have you checked into this hotel as Mr. and Mrs. Rogers? In an embarrassed and tearful voice, she said, yes. Okay, I get it. I'll leave you and your new husband alone. I'm going back home and contacting an attorney in the morning. We're done, Shelly. You've thrown away my love, our marriage, and our life together, all for some fun with this buster tennis player. No. No, baby, please, I love you and you don't understand. I don't want a divorce. You're my husband and I can't lose you. Please try and understand, I don't love him, it's just something I needed. Please understand. No, I don't understand. Okay, I'll give you another chance to explain it to me so I will understand. Tell me why I should be okay with my wife sleeping with another man and pretending to be his wife. Again, she pleaded, please try to understand. It was just supposed to be for a few days, and I needed this, it's just sex, I don't love him, I only love you. That's it. I should be okay with you sleeping with another man for a few days, so that you can have some fun. Do I have that right? Shelly was now hysterical, sobbing between her hands. She realized what she had done and did not have a good excuse. All she could do was beg him to understand her need for sex with someone else. Robbie, I'm so sorry, I was stupid, I didn't think. I love you, this is just about sex. I know that sounds bad, but we can get past this. I just want to be with you, please forgive me. I just sat there not saying a word. The tennis guy was getting annoyed and impatient and spoke up. Hey, dude, back off a little. Can't you see how upset she is? I turned to Jared and gave him the look of death. Shut the duck up, asshole, and get out of my face. Leave me and my real wife alone, you've already destroyed our marriage, isn't that enough for tonight? He got up and put his hand on Shelly's shoulder and said, I'll be in our room, babe, come up when you're done. She pushed his hand away violently, not wanting to have anything to do with him at that moment. I laughed at that. All of a sudden she wanted no part of her lover, and I was enjoying all the action. I continued to taunt Shelly as she sat there still sobbing. Honey, don't be so rude to your new husband. I guess I'm ruining your honeymoon, aren't I? We both know you want this, and that you don't want to be with me anymore. We both know that you don't love me, or you would not have cheated and disrespected me like this. Jared was gone and we were alone for the first time that night. Stay with me, please, she said with pleading eyes. For a few minutes. Tell me, how long have you been with him? She lied again and said it was the first time they had been together. He was still amazed about how easily she could lie to him. Shelly, did you ever disrespect me with him? You know, say bad things about me, or berate me while you were together or screwing him in bed. Lying again. No baby, I would never do that. I love you so much, you mean everything to me. You have to believe me. Let's just leave and go home and be together right now. I took out my phone and shut off the audio recorder that had been recording the entire event. I then started a playlist of their dialogues I had arranged over the last 6 months. First of all, I know you've been cheating on me for the last 2 years. Secondly, can you explain this to me? The audio started loud and clear. Audio file 1. Don't worry about him, he doesn't have a clue. Audio file 2. I hate having sex with him, he's so boring in bed. Audio file 3. I won't leave him, I love him, but just not for sex. Audio file 4. I stay with him because he's a good provider and father, I'll never let him go. Audio file 5. Baby, you're 10 times better in bed than my loser husband. Audio file 6. I love your clock, and the way you turn me on. Audio file 7. My kitty belongs to you, not him. Audio file 8. On our honeymoon, I want you to take my bum, he'll never have that. I told her there were over 50 audio files, each one mocking me and degrading our marriage. Your contempt for me was beyond anything I would have ever imagined. Your comments are much more than sex play, they were hurtful and disrespectful. Unfortunately, your words will haunt me forever. She had never looked so apathetic, shocked, sad, and basically destroyed, and I loved every second of her knowing she had killed our marriage, and nothing would be the same for her again. Shelly, this is why we're through. I can't handle your lies any longer. I've known that you've been cheating and ducking other men for at least the last 2 years. What you don't know is that Jake called me that night he shot his wife and your ex-lover. He heard who was on the phone with Linda, and how you loved Blake's big clock. I've known about your infidelity, how you've lied to me, disrespected me all this time. I wanted to see just how far you would go, and you never slowed down. You've made it clear by your actions and comments that I'm nothing to you but a good provider and father to our children. You can stop the charade and your lies because I have audio of all your calls and texts. I know how you feel about me, our sex, and how bad a lover I am. You see, I know it all, and soon everyone will if you don't do what I'm going to ask. You corrupted my brother's wife, helped her become a slut just like you, and I believe you have some responsibility for that tragic day. You encouraged her to be with Blake, you even set up their date. And because of your actions and cheating ways, she and my brother are no more. I'm so sorry, I'm sorry. Please forgive me, she said with her head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sure you must have wondered why I happened to be here tonight. It wasn't an accident. I knew about your plans for this week. When I realized what you had planned was so unbelievable, I just had to see it for myself. I even knew about your plans to play husband and wife on this trip and remove me from your life. I have to admit, that was painful to hear and hurt me more than you'll ever understand. Shelly never stopped crying. Shelly, you pissed on your vows, threw away our marriage, disrespected our children. Even worse, you were involved with my sister's-in-law's affair and death. There is no coming back from this. I suggest that when you are done with your honeymoon, you don't come back home. I think you should stay at your mother's house. You better tell them what you did, because if they call me and ask me why we're apart, I will tell them the truth and share everything you've done. I waited a long time before I continued allowing everything I'd said to sink in. I will be reasonable, but you will sign the divorce papers without contesting the settlement. If you do fight me, I will expose all of the videos and audio I have to everyone, including your parents. The children are old enough to decide who they want to live with, and after we explain your infidelity, lies, and deceit, I believe they will live with me. Shelly, what's really sad about this is that I loved you with all my heart, and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. When Jake told me about you, I didn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it, but I learned the horrible truth, and my heart was broken. You need to live with this guilt and loss of love forever. We will never be together again. I stood up and left Shelly still sobbing and drove back home. Epilogue. I never got over my brother's passing. Even the revenge and betrayal of my wife never brought peace. 5 years later I met a woman at a coffee shop, and we became close friends. I never married again because I could never trust another woman as I had before. We dated for several years and remained friends. Shelly had a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized for a year after the divorce was finalized. She was never welcomed back to the town that learned about her involvement in the passing of Jake and Linda, and her betrayal of her family. She lost custody of the children and only saw them every other weekend. She spent several years in a deep depression for what she had done. As long as she continued to take her medication, she was able to live on the divorce settlement and her job as a receptionist at the real estate office in her new town. The children grew up without any problems because I kept them safe and sheltered. The town rallied around me and the kids, which allowed us to lead a normal life. Shelly would never get over her loss of love, her children, and the wonderful life she once had. She went to bed every night, reflecting on how many lives she had ruined, and how her life was destroyed by her selfishness and narcissism. Shelly became active in the church and eventually turned her life over to the church, hoping to find forgiveness. Oh yeah, Mr. Tennis Pro was jumped one night after leaving another married wife. He suffered 2 severed Achilles' tendons after he was taken down by the stun gun. His tennis career had ended at that moment. When the police asked him what had happened and what he remembered, he kept quiet and didn't say. However, he did remember a voice and got the message loud and clear. He could not place the voice, but decided not to share the message with the police. He will never forget what he was told: stop ducking married women. That's it for today's story, folks. I hope you're well and I'll see you in the next video.